Lena had always been the kind of person people rarely noticed in a crowd. She walked quietly, spoke softly, and never tried to impress anyone. Most of the time, people assumed she was shy or unsure of herself. But behind her calm face, she carried something that few people ever got to see: her love for the piano. It wasn't just a hobby for her. It was the one thing that made her feel alive. When her fingers touched the keys, she forgot about everything else. No noise, no judgment, no pressure, just music. She didn't come from a family with money, so she never had the chance to take proper lessons. She learned from watching videos, listening carefully, and practicing on an old keyboard that sometimes turned off on its own. But she never complained. She had a small dream in her heart, one she kept private: to play on a real stage someday. Even if it was only once. One day, while walking through the town market, she saw a bright poster taped on a wall. It said there would be a community music showcase at the big hall next month. Anyone could perform. No age limit, no strict rules, just an open stage for people who wanted to share their talent. Lena stopped walking and read the poster twice. Her heart started beating faster. It was the kind of opportunity she never imagined would appear so easily. At first, she tried to ignore the thought. She told herself that the performers would probably be trained musicians, confident students, or people who were used to performing in front of crowds. She imagined herself walking onto a stage in front of so many people and felt her stomach twist. But later that night, as she sat in her small room and played the same melody she had practiced for months, she felt a strange warmth inside her. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the stage she dreamed of was waiting for her. So the next morning, she gathered courage and filled out the simple registration form. She didn't tell anyone except her friend Usha, who always supported her quietly. Usha didn't laugh, didn't question, didn't worry. She simply smiled and said, "You should do it. You're ready." Those words were small, but they meant everything. In the weeks leading up to the event, Lena pushed herself to practice more than ever. She didn't have a teacher to correct her, so she recorded herself playing and watched the videos to find mistakes. Sometimes she got frustrated when her fingers slipped or when her timing didn't feel right, but she always tried again. She practiced after work, late into the night, sometimes until her hands felt stiff. There were days when the old keyboard keys stuck, but she shook it gently and continued. She knew this chance might never come again. Finally, the day of the showcase arrived. Lena woke up early, even before the sun. She spent a long time choosing what to wear, not because she wanted to stand out, but because she didn't want people to judge her for looking messy or unprepared. She chose a simple light blue shirt and black trousers. Her clothes weren't new, but they were neat. She tied her hair back and took a deep breath before stepping out of her house. When she arrived at the hall, she felt overwhelmed. The place was huge compared to what she imagined. Families were gathered everywhere, parents adjusting their children's clothes, friends laughing loudly, performers carrying instruments in shiny cases. Some wore matching outfits, some looked confident and practiced, and some even had professional teachers with them, giving last-minute instructions. Compared to them, Lena felt very small. She walked quietly to the registration desk, gave her name, and received a small badge with her number on it. Then she moved to the backstage area where performers waited for their turn. She sat down near a corner, holding her music sheets close to her chest even though she had memorized the entire piece. That was when she started hearing the whispers. A group of young performers noticed her, sitting with an old keyboard bag on her lap. It was faded from years of use and had a small tear on the side. They glanced at her, then looked at each other and smirked. One of them whispered something like, "She looks like she's here by mistake." Another giggled softly and said, "Watch her mess up the first note." Lena heard those comments even though they tried to speak quietly. She felt her face grow warm, and she lowered her eyes to avoid looking at anyone. A few more performers glanced at her clothes, her bag, her quiet posture. She didn't look like someone trained or confident. She didn't look like someone who belonged on a big stage. At least, that's what they assumed. Lena tried to ignore their reactions, but she could feel the air around her getting heavier. She told herself that it didn't matter, that she came here to perform for herself, not for their approval. But it still stung. When you work hard for something and people doubt you before you even begin, it hurts even if you try to act strong. She waited as performers went on stage one by one. Some played confidently, some stumbled a little, but almost all had people cheering for them. When they returned backstage, they were greeted with hugs and loud praise. Lena sat alone, listening to it all. After almost an hour, she got up and walked to the piano placed backstage to warm up. It was an old practice instrument, but at least it didn't switch off like her own keyboard at home. She set her fingers gently on the keys. But before she could play, she felt eyes on her again. Those same young performers were watching. One whispered, "Let's see what she tries." Another chuckled. Lena felt her hands freeze. She slowly took her fingers off the keys and stepped back. She didn't want to give anyone another reason to mock her. Instead, she returned to her seat and rested her hands on her lap. Her heart felt heavy, but she didn't show it. As time passed, her nervousness grew. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. Part of her wanted to run out of the hall, go back home, and pretend this day never happened. She imagined walking out quietly, unnoticed, slipping away before her name was called. She even stood up once, thinking she would leave. But she stopped herself. She thought about how much she had practiced, about the nights she spent correcting her mistakes, about the quiet dreams she carried inside her. She didn't want to run away from something she had waited so long for. Even if people judged her, even if someone laughed, she wanted to at least try. She wanted to give herself that chance. Her moment finally came when she heard the announcer call her name. Her heart jumped. Everything around her felt blurry for a second. She stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage entrance. She could feel people looking at her, trying to figure out who she was. Some had curious expressions. Some had amused ones. But none of that mattered anymore. Her feet kept moving forward. When she stepped onto the stage, the bright lights almost blinded her. She saw the audience rows and rows of people, all watching. She felt a wave of fear rush through her, but she held onto her music sheets tightly to keep her hands steady. A few people in the front row exchanged looks. Someone whispered something to their friend. And somewhere from the left side of the hall, she heard a small giggle. It was faint, but she heard it. She walked toward the grand piano, which looked more beautiful than any instrument she had ever played. She gently placed her music sheets on the stand, even though she didn't need them, and pulled the bench closer. She sat down, straightened her back, and tried to breathe normally. Her fingers hovered above the keys, but didn't touch them yet. For a moment, the world felt too big, too loud, too heavy. She felt like the quietest person in the room, the most doubted, the most underestimated. But underneath the fear, there was also a tiny spark. It was the same spark that pushed her to register, that made her practice every night, that brought her here despite all her doubts. She took one long, slow breath, then she placed her fingers on the keys, and everything inside her went still. The moment Lena touched the keys, everything around her seemed to disappear. The bright lights, the audience, the whispers, none of it mattered anymore. All she could feel was the cool surface of the piano and the soft vibration of the first note she played. It was a gentle sound, almost like a whisper, but it carried clearly across the hall. At first, the audience didn't react. Some people were still shifting in their seats. Some were looking at their phones, and a few were whispering to each other, probably expecting another beginner performance. But then Lena moved to the next line of her melody. And something changed. Her hands, which had felt nervous moments earlier, began to find their rhythm. Each note she played flowed into the next with a calm confidence she didn't show in her everyday life. The sound grew a little stronger, fuller, and more emotional. People who were talking slowly fell silent. Those who weren't paying attention started to lift their eyes toward the stage. There was a softness in her playing, something soothing yet powerful. It felt like she wasn't just performing a piece of music. She was telling a story without words. Lena didn't notice the change in the room. She was fully lost in the music. Her head gently moved with the rhythm, her shoulders relaxed, and her fingers traveled across the keys with a grace that surprised even her. She wasn't thinking about the comments backstage, or the people who doubted her, or the ones who giggled when she walked onto the stage. In that moment, she felt free. The melody entered a slightly faster section, one that she had practiced countless times late at night. It was the part she worried about the most. Many times at home, she had made mistakes here. Her fingers would slip or she would lose the tempo. But tonight on this stage, something inside her stayed steady. Her hands moved quickly but beautifully, striking each note with precision. The hall became so quiet that even the softest sound felt loud. People in the audience leaned forward. Some exchanged surprised glances. A boy sitting in the second row nudged his friend and whispered, "She's really good." A woman who had been checking her phone stopped scrolling and looked up, her expression slowly changing from boredom to admiration. Even the young performers backstage, the ones who once smirked at her, were now peeking through the side curtains with wide eyes. They didn't expect this. No one did. As the piece continued, Lena's confidence grew. She played the piano not with force but with feeling. Every note carried emotion, hope, struggle, quiet strength, things she could never express easily with her voice. Music was the only place she could say those things, and tonight, she finally had the chance to be heard. Then came the most difficult part of the piece. It was a section with rapid notes, quick changes, and an emotional rise that required perfect timing. She took a tiny breath, just enough to steady herself, and then jumped in. Her fingers moved with surprising speed, but not once did they stumble. The notes spilled out like a sudden rush of wind, powerful yet beautiful. The audience was frozen. No one moved. Even children, who usually got restless, sat still with wide eyes. If someone had dropped a pin in the hall, it would have been heard. People were no longer seeing a quiet girl who walked nervously onto the stage. They were seeing a musician, someone who carried a gift that didn't need loud confidence or fancy clothes to prove itself. The more she played, the more the audience felt connected to her. Many didn't know her name, but the music made them feel like they understood her heart. When she reached the final part of the piece, the melody softened again. It felt like a calm wave returning to shore after a powerful storm. Her fingers slowed down, pressing each note gently, almost lovingly. Her breathing became lighter. Her shoulders loosened. The entire hall stayed perfectly silent, as if they didn't want to disturb the moment. Finally, she played the last chord. It hung in the air for just a second, and then faded softly into silence. The hall was completely still. Lena kept her hands on the keys for a moment, not sure what would happen next. She slowly lifted them, placed them on her lap, and lowered her eyes. She didn't dare look at the audience. She didn't know if they liked it, or if they thought she made mistakes. Her heart beat wildly in her chest. Her hands were slightly shaking again, not from fear of failure, but from the intensity of what she had just given. And then it happened. The entire hall erupted into applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It wasn't a small cheer. It was loud, strong, and full of surprise. Some people even stood up, clapping with excitement. Lena's head shot up in shock. For a moment, she couldn't believe the sound was for her. She saw faces filled with admiration. Some people smiled warmly. A few had emotional expressions, as if her music touched them in a personal way. She blinked, overwhelmed. People who were earlier whispering doubts were now clapping the hardest. A group of teenagers who had laughed when they first saw her looked embarrassed, but still applauded, unable to deny what they had witnessed. The boy in the second row shouted, "That was amazing," and others nodded. Lena stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she managed a small bow. The applause grew even louder when she did. She smiled shyly, her cheeks slightly flushed. It was a smile that held relief, joy, and disbelief all at the same time. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, but in that moment, she felt something she had never felt before: true acceptance. As she walked backstage, several people approached her. One of the event organizers stopped her first. He looked impressed and a little stunned. He told her that her performance was one of the most heartfelt pieces of the evening. He asked if she would be willing to perform again at future events. Lena was speechless. She could only nod with a grateful smile. some performers also came to her. A few tried to act casual, saying things like, "You were really good," or "nice performance," even though they had mocked her earlier. She didn't hold any anger. She simply thanked them politely. She wasn't someone who wanted revenge or wanted to prove anyone wrong. She only wanted the chance to do what she loved, and tonight she had done it. One girl around her age approached with genuine admiration in her eyes. She said she had been playing piano for years, but had never seen someone play with such emotion. Lena felt her heart warm at the compliment. She didn't think of herself as special, but hearing someone say that made her realize that maybe she had something meaningful inside her after all. She packed her old keyboard bag. She touched it gently. She remembered how many nights she had practiced on her worn-out keys, how many times she felt frustrated, how many times she wanted to give up. But she didn't. And this night, the applause, the admiration, the silence she created in that huge hall proved that every moment of effort had been worth it. She stepped outside the hall, where the air felt cool and fresh. The sky was dark, but the lights from the building cast a soft glow on her face. She stood there for a few seconds, hugging her bag close. She didn't need anything else, not trophies, not prizes, not certificates. The applause was enough. The look on people's faces was enough. Knowing she had touched hearts with her music was more than enough. As she walked home, she felt lighter than ever. She wasn't walking like the quiet, unnoticed girl anymore. She walked like someone who had discovered something new inside herself. Courage. She thought about how people laughed when she first sat backstage, how they doubted her, how they assumed she didn't belong. But she also thought about how the music had changed everything. It didn't matter what anyone expected or assumed. What mattered was what she carried inside her, something no one could see until the moment she chose to share it. She didn't need to speak loudly to make people listen. She didn't need to dress fancy to be respected. She didn't need anyone's approval to chase her dreams. All she needed was one chance, one stage, one moment where she let her true self shine, and on that night, she did. She walked the rest of the way home with a peaceful smile on her face, knowing that the hall she walked into nervously had become the place where she found her voice through the music that lived in her heart.